what do we actually do with self-awareness? When we start to see our external self, our internal self, our ego, the rules, filters, our survival state, our narrative, etc. So, how do we use this layered insight to heal? There's a lot to unpack, so this is just the beginning. My first recommendation is to keep a journal. Write down your realizations and thoughts as they happen. If you don't, it's easy to forget the progress you're making. Note your insights and later come back to them, pull them apart, play with them, and see how they fit your life. Remember, your first interpretation is rarely the full story. This process of self-discovery can take years, even a lifetime, and that's okay. We're constantly evolving. As we move through life, different parts of ourselves become important at different times. Priorities shift. As we grow, our relationships, emotional needs, and even our reactions to stress can change. Keeping a private journal over the years gives us a record to look back on, a tool for growing our awareness and the understanding of who we are. But one of the biggest blocks to healing is how we communicate. We all have filters, rules, and scripts we use when we interact with others. Most miscommunication comes down to emotional priorities and the felt meanings we assign to the words we choose to use. For example, if a child grew up hearing "I love you" while being harmed, that word will always trigger a stress response within the nervous system, even as an adult. Our nervous system remembers, and words become loaded with our own history. That is why we sometimes react so strongly to what others say. It is not about them, but about what those words mean to us. This is not anyone's fault. People are not misinterpreting you because they're bad or you have stuffed up. It is just that their emotional interpretations are different to yours. Once we get that, we can start building stronger, more supportive connections, learning to communicate more clearly with the important people in our lives. Social media makes this harder. So much is lost over a screen. True connection happens in person, where our nervous systems can read all the subtle cues we rely on. Video calls are a good start, but at some point we need real-world interactions to truly grow and heal. The way we express ourselves is the first step in building connections. It's how we decide whether someone is safe, supportive, or worth keeping in our circle. Understanding our triggers and how we might trigger others helps us navigate relationships with more care, not to submit, but to communicate more effectively. If you've experienced trauma, you might need to relearn these skills, and that's absolutely okay. Healing is about practice, patience, and self-compassion. It takes time, but it is well worth the journey.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening all, it's Bear here. I'd like to welcome you to my YouTube channel, A Box With No Lid, a channel I've spent the last few years creating, delving in and exploring the story and narrative that is trauma, the reality and the world that is trauma and how it plays out and impacts in people's lives. Now I do this from my own personal journey and experiences as I'm an adoptee and I was trafficked and sold as an infant, as well as my many years as an advocate and as a practitioner, all with this simple hope that something you may learn or hear here will be supportive and helpful in your own healing journey, but also help to expand the awareness, as so much of healing trauma comes down to what we do in the minutes, hours, and days of our waking and sleeping lives, not in the therapist's office. So much of it comes down to our own understandings of what is going on and why, and in the real world context, how it plays out in our lives, and what we can do to change that, to improve the quality of our lives by taking the steps to create those changes day to day. Now in this video, following on from the last few, I want to start to explore what do we do when we start to gain some insights into our external self, our internal self, our ego, the rules that our survival state has created, the rules that we have created and the filters we have created in how we engage the world around us. How do we start to work with it to heal? Now, there's going to be a lot of videos around this because there's a lot to cover in this. But in this video, I just want to give you the basics and where to begin. For me, it is really important to create a journal around this, to start writing things down, unless you have the ability to remember things at will. Write this stuff down. When you create realizations and understanding, jot them down. Think about them and explore them later. Pull them apart and play with them and see how they play out in your interpretations, because our first interpretation is never the whole story. There is these aspects of ourself are rabbit holes that we can take years and lifetimes exploring. There's a reason why in older cultures so much time throughout a person's life is spent doing these journeys. It's because we are constantly evolving and learning and growing as a person, exploring and awakening depths that back then we weren't aware of, and now we are. The requirements of our life change. So different parts of ourselves that weren't so important before now become that. In the world of trauma, personal relationships when you're young are not as critical as personal relationships when you're older. And so the priorities are different. The way we interpret our emotional priorities are different. And what we seek is different. Our ability for fight and flight plays out and our reactions are different. So we need to do this, and it is an evolving journey, and having a journal that we can keep for years. No one needs to read it. But this is for us to be able to go back and grow our awareness and understanding of who we are. Now in this video, in the healing aspects of this, I'll do a few in a row. But this one, I want to emphasize one of the key blocks, which is our communication. We all have filters. Our survival states have rules. We all have scripts that we follow in the way we engage and interact with people. And like I mentioned in the last video, the basis of the majority of miscommunication comes down to my emotional priorities, the way I speak, I emphasize, and certain types of words have different meanings, and the strength of those meanings comes down to my narrative and my emotional priorities. Now your emotional priorities are different. The emotional words that you prioritize are different. The way you interpret words is different. And that is one of the difficulties in communication. It's really difficult when you're doing something on this subject area on a format like YouTube. But when you realize that, and you explore it and you start to see just how common it is in our day-to-day lives, you can start to explore the nuances of how we communicate and how we interpret what is said to us. We learn and develop the skills to take a few moments to go, well, did that person intend it the way I'm receiving it, or was it different? To put value to this. The way I've explained it in talks and that over the years is a little extreme, but it gets the point across. So if you have an infant and a child growing up in a household where they're beaten every day, and every time they're beaten by their caregiver says, I'm doing this because I love you. This is out of love. When they grow up in adolescence, and every time they hear the word love, their body and nervous system is going to reflect that trauma and abuse. Now, even as an adult, when you go, I know that love doesn't mean that. Cognitively, I know. I'm pursuing love. I want love in my life. Your nervous system and your body, that child's body, that person's body, doesn't interpret it that way. And no matter how hard you try, your narrative will react and respond to anything around love. Anytime that word is shown, anything that reflects that word, hearts and all these sorts of things, relationships and families and everything that plays out from that experience, our nervous system responds negatively. It is a priority word. And then when it gets dropped, we interpret it differently, and we have a whole stack of emotions going, how do I interpret this word the way they want me to? What are they meaning? What are they reflecting? Are they going to harm me? There's all these things that go into play in the background that shape the interpretation of that word for that person. We do it ourselves from our own experiences growing up. The words we've associated with traumatic experiences, with bad and negative things in our early childhood. And those words and priorities have grown and have been layered upon in the way we articulate words, the way we prioritize the meanings, aspects of words in our vocabulary. and the way we interpret the words given to us or spoken to us by others. When you start to pull this rabbit hole apart, and I'm trying to keep it as concise as possible, but it's difficult in this subject area. But when we start to understand that that process exists first and foremost, that they're misinterpreting me not because they're a bad person or I've done something wrong or they're doing something wrong. It's just their emotional priorities are different to mine. Therefore, the way they've interpreted my words differently. The emotions that I'm looking fulfilled from what I'm saying are the opposite of what they're getting. When we start to understand these processes, we can start to take moments to create a middle ground, to learn how to communicate with key people in our life. And in that process, build a stronger understanding and a stronger connection. In this world of social media, it makes it very, very difficult because so much communication is put down to a screen. A screen, you don't have the physicality of presence. And what you can do over a screen is very, very limited. The only way to truly learn the vernacular and understandings that I'm talking about with people is they've got to be in your physical presence. Because there's so many other parts that our nervous system will draw upon to work with this. And this is all the negotiations that we do. Starting off safe in video communication is fine. But at some point, it needs to come down to physical connections and physical interactions for our nervous system to develop and expand and grow with the way that we communicate and interact with others and the way we filter and interpret what they're saying and how they filter and interpret what we're saying. I know this gets a little messy in trying to explain it. But in our external self, the way we articulate and verbalize is the first port of call when we're engaging with people. It's the first port of call of building connections that are either supportive or destructive, that are either threat interpreted or no, you can come in and be part of my journey, my life, and my circle. Understanding how we react and how we respond and what trips us and what we do that trips others is very helpful in this. Because there are times when, yes, you need to trip somebody else, but there are times when you don't. There are times when a little bit more delicate can get you more of what you need to fulfill. Not at your expense. This is not submitting. This is learning the art and the ability to articulate, which is all the stuff that trauma in a childhood takes. Growing up in a safe and secure environment, safe and secure family, a safe and secure explorative environment, you learn all these skills as a kid. But when we come from trauma and when trauma takes that away from us, we lose all of that and we need to relearn it. And that's why this is so important. If we want to come out of survival, we need to relearn skills that trauma took from us or never developed in the first place because of trauma was there so young. I really hope you guys value this. And I'm doing the next few videos around the healing and negotiating and working with this. So stay tuned. And I upload videos every week. So look for these videos. As always, I love you guys' comments and feedback. I thank you for your support of the channel. Be safe, be mindful, be respectful, and I will see you all next time. Hope.